3rd, 2024. It is 6:32 p.m. Present this evening are Commissioners Michael Henry, Michael Richards, Jake Pearson, Lisa Malkiewicz, Pete Hristo, and I am Marion Patterson. I'm the chair. Excused this evening is Ned Hacker. From staff, we have Zachary Smallwood, David Rogers, Mark Richardson, and Ruth Ruock. We welcome the public. We thank you for being here at our meeting. Some etiquette items to review. We ask that you take a moment and silence your cell phones. When the time comes to make a comment on an agenda item, we ask that you come to the microphone for the recording and state your name and address for the minutes. Once the item you are here for is over, you are welcome to leave. We just ask that you do so quietly so we can continue with our meeting. If you are watching this meeting online on the live stream, the only way to make a comment is to email planningcommission@murray.utah.gov. If you post a comment on the Facebook or YouTube, it will not be seen tonight. So we will start with our business items. Item number 1, our meeting minutes. We have minutes from September 5th and the September 19th, 2024 meetings. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of these two meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
And we had one correction that we noted in the pre-meeting. Were there any other changes or comments on the minutes?
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from September 5th, 2024 and September 19th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those minutes, motion passes. Agenda item number 2, conflicts of interest. Do any of the commissioners have a conflict of interest with any of the agenda items this evening?
No.
Neither do I. All right, approval of finding of facts. Have the commissioners had an opportunity to review the findings of fact and conclusions for the conditional use permits for Erickson State Farm and Combustion Motorsports?
Yes.
Are there any changes or corrections to those?
No.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the findings of facts for Erickson State Farm and Combustion Motorsports.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, conditional use permit for Vera Salon Suites. Is the applicant here this evening? Great. We'll first have a presentation from staff by Ruth Ruock.
Thank you. So we have a request here from Vera Salon Suites for a conditional use permit for the operation of a body art studio at 4770 South, 900 East. So the proposed body art studio would occupy an existing building, about 10,000 square feet, and it sits on a 0.71 acre lot, and the site is highlighted in blue. So the property is zoned for CD, commercial development, and it's surrounded by other properties zoned for CD as well, except for an office space south of the property zoned as GO, general office. And since body art studios are not specifically listed as a permitted use within the zone, a conditional use permit is needed. And here's a site plan. The building will not change. And here are the floor plans. You'll see that there are many suites that the body art studio might occupy, and there's an existing beauty supply store and a hair salon, and the applicant believes that a body art studio would complement those existing services. So the subject property has one access from 900 East, circle in red, and it's a shared access with other businesses in the area. And 4 parking stalls are required for every 1,000 square feet, so 26 parking stalls are required, and the applicant has provided 36. Per city code, we sent 11 notices for this proposal to the public, and so far, staff has not received any comments. And as for our findings, the proposed use for a body art studio is allowed in the CD zone, subject to conditional use approval. And with the conditions outlined in the staff report, the proposed use will comply with the standards of the Murray City Land Use Ordinance, and the proposed use is not contrary to the goals and objectives of the Murray City General Plan in this area. And so with that, staff recommends that the planning commission approve a conditional use permit to allow the operation of a body art studio, subject to the following conditions. And I'm willing to answer any questions if you have them.
I know this is an existing building, but does it meet the requirements for access? Or is that a concern, like ADA type access?
It does meet the requirements, it does.
So it meets code for that?
Mhm.
It's a little hard to tell on the floor plans, okay.
Hold on, you have 1 second.
I've got another question, I guess, kind of, and I know it's an existing situation, but is there any kind of barrier on, I think that's the east side between that parking lot and the adjacent parking lot, right along that east?
Yeah, so I believe there is a small curb, like a small curb and I think some rocks, like just some planted rocks, and we can have the applicant address that as well, too.
Any other questions? Okay, if we could have the applicant come forward.
My name's Ian Schwarting. What do you need me to do?
Oh, state your address for the
Oh.
record.
Like where I live?
It can be your personal address or business address.
568 South 5 East in Vineyard, Utah 84059.
Great. And have you had the opportunity to review, or to, review the conditions?
I have,
And you'll be able to comply with those?
absolutely.
Great. Do you want to get some clarification from the applicant?
Well, just.
It's a gigantic handicap ramp. I don't know if that's what you call them,
Okay,
but we
that-
built like a
that's-
million
that's
mile
in the-
ramp.
That's in the back that goes down to the main floor, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's one of those 80s buildings where you walk in and you like go half upstairs or half
Right,
downstairs.
That's what I figured.
They were not thinking about folks in wheelchairs back then. But yeah, so we do have ADA access. And we did pull a building permit, so we're complying to all of the federal, local guidelines for everything in terms of
And then along that
accessibility.
east side of the parking lot,
There's an island
there is an island?
Yep.
Okay, I assumed.
that separates us from the break, and there's a tax attorney to our east as well.
There's a grade difference too, isn't there?
There's a grade difference.
Yeah, I think the two parking lots are a little bit.
Elevation.
I don't know. We redid all the asphalt. If you know that little area, it looks a million times better. Not that that has anything to do with tattoos, but it looks really good.
Is there any additional information you want to give the commission about your application?
No, well, yes, I guess I'll say something else. So, I don't know why cities sometimes, and I think that this is going in the right direction, but cities and planning commissions, they tend to look down on tattoo artists or people that have or get tattoos, and they have like weird zoning requirements. I mean, the folks that we provide services to, our end client is not the person getting the tattoo. Our end client is the person offering tattoo services. And they're almost always women that are offering the tattoos, and they offer them typically as additional income. It's like, hey, I already do eyelashes, I already do, permanent makeup in terms of like tattooing people's eyebrows on and permanent makeup on their lips. And for some reason, in some cities and jurisdictions, even though they're highly regulated, they don't allow them to do body art. And it takes away income from a lot of times people that are breadwinners from their family. So all this, almost exclusively people in our salon are gonna be giving tattoos that's like a cute horoscope sign on somebody's wrist. It's not like a biker bar, people doing heroin. It's just really basic stuff and a way for these gals primarily to have additional income. And I'd encourage you, if you're ever zipping by, come in and tour it. They're really cool. These gals, one of the things we do is we allow these, I say gals, we have a guy every now and then, but we allow them to decorate their places how they want. We're not a unique business, but we are a little more open in terms of how they can do their decoration and kind of be a little bit more individual. And the tattoo folks usually do a really cool designs and are pretty artsy.
That's good info.
Is this entire building part of that salon and
The whole thing, yep.
the whole thing.
Yeah, so it was, for whatever it's worth, it was an office building, and it experienced what a lot of office buildings experienced during COVID, where it's probably a 50-person company. They downsized, and it left the building with nobody there, and there's already suites built out, and so we just came in, we put sinks in, did a full remodel, and that's what we used the whole space for.
So you'll occupy all the suites on both levels.
They're quite large compared to our normal sizes, and it's really cool. A lot of them overlook that, like little creek back there. There's ducks and stuff waddling around, but yes, we do occupy all of them. I would bet, by the way, that tattoo artists, or whatever you want to call them, I bet out of the 30-something suites, we'll maybe have 2 people offer tattoos. It's not like a significant part of our business. I just hate to turn people down and say, hey, it's illegal to do tattoos here.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, we'll have you sit down.
Thanks.
I will now open this application open for public comment. If there's anyone that would like to come and speak into the microphone about this agenda item. Did we receive any online comments? Okay. I will close the public comment period and bring it back for discussion or a motion.
I have one more question about the occupancy. Are all these suites sublet by individual businesses, or they're all run under the auspices of one business?
They're all separate businesses.
Sublet.
So presumably, they all have business licenses with Murray City and the Salt Lake County Health Department, and they're all run completely independently.
So you're saying that there could be lots of different kinds of businesses in these suites. You're just coming to get the approval for Body Art Studio because that's a conditional use in that zone, right? They
That's
could have a
correct.
salon, they could have a lash studio, they could have lots of other things in all of these suites.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Zach, is there any,
And I have another question for staff, and maybe this just for my education. If the individual business comes in, I thought it was their responsibility to get the conditional use permit.
Not necessarily, like he's doing here. This allows him the opportunity to lease out for that to people that have it, because he will have the conditional use already prepared. So him being the overarching property owner, and conditional use permits run with the land. So it's kind of prepared that way.
Zach, am I correct that even if the property owner changes, the conditional use still applies? It's only when that conditional use stops being used that the conditional use could go away?
So even then, the conditional use still applies. So there's very often times where, like, I'll take like an auto sales in Garco, for example. They will go away for a while, and then if a new one comes and applies for an auto sales business in that same unit, we will just pull that conditional use, because it does run with it. So we will pull that conditional use, and then they are subject to those same conditions. But we don't re-bring it back to you.
But,
Yep.
and it brings up interesting questions though, because then the owner of Garco could come to us and get a permit to sell or repair auto cars and all of his units, and then they wouldn't have to do it onesies.
that's true.
And we've had so many people come to us for the Garco, that's one that was on my mind. It has to be 80% approved. But it's interesting that we approve units or the whole building.
It's just who applies, I think. I do think, though, that, so the question I was going to ask you before, Body Art Studio is not an allowed use in any zone, right? It's
So-
always conditional.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I think in like the mixed-use zones, it's a permitted use.
But they would still have to come get a conditional use permit. No, it's a permitted use.
It's a
so
permitted
allowed.
use, so
Okay.
it is allowed, yeah.
I do think that that is something that we could revise and relook at, the way that it's conditional and what zones it's conditional in, because, I mean, I do think that there was in former code some stigma against body art studios, and now the way that it's being done is so different. It is these individual businesses that are renting individual places. And I think that, yeah, having an allowed use, especially in some zones, that it's not currently in, would be a good place to revisit some of those.
If that's something that you guys kind of support, we could definitely look at a text amendment that amends some of that, especially probably in like the CD zone.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
Yeah.
Particularly, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I
If
would
you
say
were-
most places a salon would be an allowed use. They would have such similar impacts.
yeah, so, I mean, I agree. The only one I would be a little bit worrisome over is that we do allow salon businesses in the GO. If you remember recently, back in like 2022, I think it was, we brought forward a text amendment that actually put tattoo as a conditional
Conditional
use
use.
in the GO zone. I think it's still good to leave that there.
Okay.
But I think definitely
were-
like the CD zone.
That one that came was doing something really similar
Yeah,
to this.
Black Art
They
Studio
had-
or
Yeah,
something.
they
Yeah, it
had.
was
Well, right
literally-
across the street.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
right across
that's what
the
I was gonna
street.
say, that
Yeah.
is maybe getting redeveloped, but they were
Yeah.
doing, yeah, something similar, that it was a
Yeah.
and it's by appointment, it's not, you know what I mean, a lot of those
Sure.
places are,
Zach, couldn't we tack that onto the back of a meeting, a 10-minute discussion, so we get an idea of what we would all support? And then,
Sorry, say that one more time.
couldn't we tack that onto the back of a meeting, a discussion about body art tattoo, in what zones we would support?
Yeah, I would just have to agendize it, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, and then, yeah, we could have that discussion.
And then we could discuss it, and then you could take our discussion, put together the text amendment, and come back with it.
I think it would be a good thing to revisit the way that
Okay.
has gone. In the way that body art studios are being used now
Yeah.
versus how they were in code before.
So if we're asking for a discussion of that in the future, will you look into, maybe you already know the answer, but is there any stipulations about body art and proximity to alcohol?
No.
Like
There-
churches or alcohol?
No,
Or schools or anything like that?
no, tattoo there definitely is not, no.
I didn't know, but if there was those stipulations, it might make changing our rules more difficult. But if there isn't, then it will make it easier.
Yeah, no, yeah, there, I don't think there is from the state. I've never seen something where we've had to measure anything.
Right, and they all, and this is why I feel like it's a good thing to revisit, because they all have to get licensed to, by the state, to be able to be doing tattoos, right? So we're just
Correct.
saying we're opening more places that they could do it as an allowed use,
Sure.
right? We're not saying we want more or less, right? They're already, just like a hair studio, right? You have to
Yep.
get licensed already, so. Unless there's further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the conditional use permit to allow body art studio for Vera Salon Suites at 4770 South, 900 East.
Is there a second?
All second.
How important is it that we say include the conditions listed in the motion?
Oh. I was looking for that wording. Yeah, subject, to okay, I'll amend
I don't know if it's important.
amend my motion to include subject to the following three conditions stated in the application.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Henry and a second by Commissioner Hersto to approve the conditional use permit to allow a body art studio at the property address 4770 South, 900 East, subject to the three conditions. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, we can take a vote.
Commissioner Henry,
Aye.
Commissioner Haristo,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Milkovich.
Yes,
Commissioner Pearson,
Yes.
and Chair Patterson.
Yes. Motion passes. Congratulations. I do want to commend you for coming in and doing that conditional use permit for all of the people that will be renting out your studios. I think that's a really cool thing that you've done. So good luck with your business.
We can never group people in and make their life easier, we try to. And just so you know, we do this with Bountiful, Layton, West Valley. Your planning staff was a pleasure to work with.
It's great to hear. We agree. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, 93 Woodrow subdivision. Are the applicants present? Great. We'll have a presentation by staff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioners. Yeah, this is a request to do a flag lot subdivision on the property at 93 West Woodrow. Here on your map, it's highlighted in blue. It is in the R18 zone, which does allow flag lot subdivision, subject to preliminary and final approval. Excuse me. So here is the plat. It looks a little funky, but most properties in Murray end up looking a little funky because we're running out of land. And also there are two existing homes on this property currently, which kind of gets into this next slide here. You have lot 1 and lot 2 here. They do meet the, I want to clarify and make it be known on the record that lot 1 does have a 15-foot rear yard setback, which is allowed for houses that were built prior to April 7th, 1987. I believe these houses were built in the 50s. I believe before Murray City even had a zoning ordinance. And then lot 2, it shows a 15-foot rear yard setback, but they do have greater than that. We did confirm with our engineering team as well that if these homes were to be like demolished, they could meet the current 25-foot rear yard setback and the front yard 25-foot rear yard setback. Everything else is pretty consistent. It's a pretty standard subdivision. So 74 notices of the public meeting were sent to affected entities within 300 feet of the subject property. We haven't received any comments on the proposal. I will say one person did come in asking a question because he lives right here and that's not his name or his LLC. It didn't have anything to do with the application itself, but just make sure we're clear on that. Findings here and are outlined in your staff report. We do find that it will meet the Title 16 subdivision ordinance, and flag lots are allowed in by Chapter 17.76. So with that, we are recommending that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for a flag lot subdivision, subject to the 10 conditions as outlined. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, if we could, oh, sorry, did you have a question?
I think I had a question, sorry. Zach, can you go back one slide? Maybe 2 slides to the map of the property.
Yeah.
The second house in the back lot on the bottom, it says it has an 8-foot side setback.
Okay.
And that, I don't think it matters to the overall of this project. I don't think it affects the project. But I just, because I saw it, I wanted to ask. The house is set back slightly from the fence line, but the carport is right on the fence line. Is that 8-foot setback referring to the house itself?
It's probably the carport.
Then I don't, unless the fence is 8 feet off the property line, it's, I guess the only reason it would matter is that the guys need to understand the current layout fits the old zoning, and if they wanted to make any changes, they would have to go through some processes, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. That's the only thing that would matter about that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, if we could have the applicant come forward. You can both cover, yeah. And will you state your name and address for the record?
Kyle Zach, 4190 South Highland Drive, Suite 102, Holiday 84124.
Great. Will you state yours?
I'm the same address. I'm Brian Anderson, but that's the same address.
Perfect. And have you had an opportunity to review the conditions?
We have, yep.
And you'll be able to comply with those?
Yep.
Okay, great. Is there any additional information you'd like to give the commission about your project?
Pretty straightforward. Not a
Okay.
whole lot.
Is there any information you request from us?
So I guess, we were talking in the pre-meeting that the way these two properties are right now, they're non-conforming based on what the rules were, Do you have any plans to do any changes or anything that would need to make them come into current conforming setbacks?
Besides these requirements that were listed, the 10.
Right.
Well, these requirements are for the existing.
This is for the
Oh, okay.
to subdivide and make them to lots, the flag
Yeah, we
lots.
won't need to ask for any variances.
Okay,
I guess, I think our concern is we just want to be fair, make sure you know as much as we know, and know that if there's any changes, there's more processes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
great. Okay, any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll have you guys sit down.
Thank you.
Okay, I will open this agenda item up for public comment. If anyone would like to come and make a comment. Did you receive any online? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for discussion or a motion.
I'll make a motion then, that the planning commission grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for a flag lot subdivision for the proposed 93 Woodrow subdivision located at 93 West Woodrow Street, subject to the following 10 conditions.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion by Commissioner Richards and a second by Commissioner Henry to grant preliminary and final subdivision approval for a flag lot subdivision for the proposed 93 Woodrow subdivision located at 93 West Woodrow Street, subject to the 10 conditions. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, we can take a vote.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Milkovich,
Yes.
Commissioner Haristo,
Yes.
Commissioner Pearson,
Yes.
and Chair Patterson.
Yes. So motion passes, and good luck with your flag lot subdivision. Thanks for being here. Okay, agenda item number 6, MCCD zone map amendment. We'll have our presentation by staff.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. So this item is a text amendment for the Murray City Center District Zone, modifying the height of a specific area in that zone, specifically east of State Street and south of Vine Street. And this request allows an additional 15 feet of height and a change of 1 additional story to a portion of the zone in the location indicated above. So, as we mentioned, this is a text amendment to change the heights of a portion of this zone and the story limits of a portion of this zone. Originally, the code reads that new buildings located east of State Street and south of Vine Street shall not exceed 6 stories in height or 70 feet, whichever is less, and the proposed language changes that from 6 stories to 7 stories and from 70 feet to 85 feet. This map shows all of the parcels that are currently in the MCCD zone south of Vine Street and east of State Street that would be affected. And this map is just an example to show what we're talking about when we're looking at the different, when we're looking at this lot. The reason that this text amendment has been brought is that the RDA entered into an agreement with a developer to redevelop this lot. This is the Arlington School, the old City Hall site. And as they were moving forward with the development, they realized that when they measured the heights from different roads, because the city code asks that heights are measured from the closest road to the height point. So when they measured from different sites, they found that the site, as they proposed, would not be able to be built as they wanted to, and so that's why they're requesting these height changes. So notices were sent to affected entities for this amendment, and as of the date of this meeting, we had a sign company inquire about the changes, but no other comments. So the findings are that this proposed change is in harmony with Initiative 1 of the General Plan, which states revitalize downtown east of State Street by allowing elements that attract businesses and residents to the future development. Staff finds that continuing to review and update development standards furthers the city mission of guiding growth to promote prosperity and sustain a high quality of life for those who live, work, and shop and recreate in Murray. This text amendment is in harmony with Objective 2 of the land use and urban design element of the general plan to encourage revitalization in the core of the city by offering zoning incentives for areas targeted for revitalization. And staff also finds that the update to the code supports the neighborhoods and housing element of the general plan to support a range of housing types by encouraging the development to prioritize for sale units of various sizes. And so with the background and analysis within the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the proposed amendment to sections 17.170.120 subsection F within the MCCD zone as reviewed in the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
We discussed this a little bit earlier, but apparently this project was put in and already included 7 stories, even though the limitation was 6?
Yes. So technically, so it's a little complicated. So this project does not have any land use approvals yet. They are still going through construction drawings and purchasing the property. So in the future, hopefully soon, this body will actually review the project. So when they entered into an agreement with the developer, this is the standard with which they are
I'm sorry, who entered into the agreement with?
the redevelopment agency.
Okay,
Murray's redevelopment agency.
Yes.
right?
so assuming were there competing proposals to the redevelopment agency?
Yes. So they did what's called an RFP, so a request for proposals.
Right.
And they got a handful of proposals that they reviewed. This one was selected as their preferred. And so they entered into an agreement to work
Did
towards
the-
that.
did- What I'm worried about a little bit is that the other people that submitted proposals to the redevelopment agency complied with the existing rule and were excluded. Or the other one was chosen over them, and it was non-compliant to the rules.
So I would say, from my understanding, every picture that has been shown has been consistent. So.
Consistently non-compliant.
Correct. But the RDA has that flexibility. If they like a project, they're allowed to pick what project they like. It's not like the RDA is separate from the city. They are a corporation.
But this is a very good discussion to inform us. But when they pick a project, they're not necessarily, they're saying, we like your company, we like your price, we like your idea. They're not approving a project.
Correct. Yep, that's exactly correct. But they are, so their development agreement, their sales agreement is subject to the site plan and the pictures that were rendered. Those are
But
included as
wouldn't
attachments to their sales agreement.
Part of that RFP be compliance to the zoning?
In theory, yes.
Okay, could one of the developers that didn't win that proposal come back and say, we followed the rules and restrictions and weren't chosen? You chose somebody that didn't follow the rules and restrictions.
Yeah, what's the legality around it?
Technically, with this being said that I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving legal
Well,
advice,
That's maybe
right,
why
right.
I'm wondering if.
is
our
that,
attorney needs to weigh in.
so they have the latitude to make that decision. It's not that, they are not approving the project, kind of like Lisa said. So they're not approving a project, they're selecting a developer. That developer has not gone through any land use approvals yet, hence why we're here. Because if they were to submit for a project, we would end up telling them, sorry, it's too high, and you have to revise it down. They realized that, so now we are here changing that before they go through any land use approvals.
And along that same line of thought, if they're submitting an idea, a theory, it's not precise because they haven't gone through all the different hoops yet.
Correct.
There should be some flexibility in that theory to be a little shorter, a little taller, depending what the ground actually happens when you get on the ground.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So they should have some flexibility within their plan. So us saying no shouldn't be a deal breaker. It should be, or yes, whichever we say today. But the builder should have the understanding that they're gonna have to be a little flexible.
I think too, the RDA, and I mean, I'm not an expert in this, and I'm definitely not a lawyer either, but I think the RDA could have chosen any plan,
Right.
whether it could have been the Statue of Liberty, and they could have approved it. That doesn't mean that's what's gonna be built, because it wouldn't,
Well, that means the Statue of Liberty is gonna be 7 stories high or 6 stories high.
well, or they could have proposed
the
one
zone.
that's 1,000 feet high, and the RDA could have said, yeah, we want that, we're gonna pick that as our project, and then it's up to the RDA to try to get the changes done so they could build such plan, and if they can't get that changed, then they can't build it.
They can't build it, and then, yeah, the deal would probably fall through.
With the statute of liberty, not
Correct.
necessarily
I
this
think,
one.
I think we could also say that we don't know that the other plans were not in conformance either.
I don't know what the
Exactly.
other plans were.
So Zach, just to clarify, assuming initially they thought they were compliant, they could build their project
Yeah.
as stated.
Yeah,
right?
like as Mr. Rogers over
Yeah.
here mentioned, they had thought that we measured from
Exactly.
State Street, not Myrtle Avenue.
Right, so all of the other proposers to the RFP had the same opportunity, right?
Correct.
To evaluate, and then they weren't chosen just on this one issue, right? They were
Oh,
chosen
definitely not.
because there were
The
a
whole
variety of
package.
factors
Yeah,
why this particular developer was chosen over the others.
correct.
I guess though, exactly, I agree with you, but I guess maybe that's what our initial question was meant to be. Is this a factor that was a deal breaker for others or no? But it wasn't.
And that I can't answer because I was not part of the selection committee.
I think the height thing is easy to overlook. The story thing is not as easy, but I don't think it matters personally, but.
Wait, explain that.
I mean, I don't like I don't like how it went down, but I think they still have the opportunity to come and ask for this.
Well, I'm also bothered by the fact that, for some reason that is still not clear to me, we dropped it from 10 stories to 6, and from 135 feet to 70 before this process even began, and now we're pushing it back up. And it also sounded to me, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, that there was questions from the commission on why we're lowering it for this one specific area in the zone anyway, we're spot zoning. My inclination is if we do anything, that we just strike section F out of this, out of 17-170-120.
But doing that would be, what would that end result? It means you just rely on A. Is that what you're saying?
Then A becomes,
The norm.
which is what it was a year ago.
I somewhat agree with you, but I think I have an issue with it. I said this in the pre-meeting. I don't think it should be different from the rest of the zone. I think the zone should be consistent. That's what I think. But because the RDA went forward with the plan and got all these plans, I think we should probably approve this as it's written, because we're going to hopefully get what the RDA wants, and I think that's what the city wants, and I think that's what probably we want. I don't know that for sure, but
And striking that might open another can of worms where
yeah,
other
I'm
folks
just
that wanted
afraid what
something
happens if
else
we
will come
strike the
back
whole
and say-
thing, then the developer could revise the whole plan, and I don't know.
And I will,
Well,
let me also,
and I guess part of what I'm worried about is those other developers did not, in a sense, in my mind, and from the background I come from, did not have a fair
Shot at the project?
shot at winning this proposal with the RDA because they may have been compliant.
But I'm worried though, exactly what you said, if we strike F and move to A, then they might have a strong argument. Because I was,
it won't matter either way, to be honest with you. Because they have that latitude. Just like, so let me take a different approach to this. Say like any one of you decides to sell your house tomorrow, and you put a stipulation on there that you will not remove a rock from a specific area. And you get that written in as a covenant or something like that. I've lost my train of thought, it's gone away. But you can put that on there, right? And it doesn't matter who comes later, you can't remove that. And so that's kind of like, and that's their right as a property owner, is that they can do that. And so the right of the property owner of the RDA is different than the city council. The city council has a different approach. They have to do fair market value, they have to surplus property. RDA, because it is I believe it's a corporation, it's a semi-public thing. They have very different rules on when they can sell property. just like for the example of, that just happened on Tuesday. The RDA sold the chapel or are entering into a negotiation with T Rose Diner to buy the chapel. It appraised at, I think, $500 and something thousand. They received two offers. One was for 120, one was for 230. They took the lower offer because they can do that as part of the RDA. The job of the RDA is to spur economic development and to spur development to a blighted area, which is the downtown. So they can choose whomever they want to sell a property to, just like you could choose whoever you want to sell to a degree. Racial discrimination, that's a whole different thing. But you can choose who you sell your property to.
There's still a quasi-governmental organization too.
Quasi, that's the word there. When it comes to property, it's different. They have to follow open public meetings, things like that. But being an RDA, they do have much more latitude. So regardless, that point is kind of moot at this point. It's not, I don't believe, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it opens the city up to litigation no matter which way you go. Because it's the RDA that's making the decision, which is separate from what the city is doing.
Yeah, from our discussion thus far, I'm less concerned about previous applicants wanting to litigate the loss and more concerned about the appearance to the public as if we are deferring to developers. Giving in to developers' wishes because we're wishy-washy. It can't be 10 stories, it'll only be 6 stories. Oh, you want 7? Okay, we can make it 7.
Well, I would.
But can I want to, because I'm not sure I'm voting yet, I want the record to also show that I'm worried about losing a developer because we've been chasing developers for the downtown area for 25, 60 years, and we keep losing good developments because we're wishy-washy. So there's two sides to this coin.
And that's what I would say is that you do have, we have to take into consideration that when this project was approved, there was not one single comment against, or when the purchase was approved, I believe there was almost no public comment against it. And
Against what, I'm sorry?
against the purchase price based on the renderings that were shown at the RDA.
It's a project we like.
It was a project that the RDA liked, and it seemed like the public liked as well, because it did strike a balance. It wasn't a, 7-story, purely residential with very small commercial. It had a lot of medical office that will bring in tax benefit to the city with, and let's keep that into perspective as well, is that they're maxed at 99 units, right? Sorry, what?
Put the picture up, will you?
Picture?
Can we see a picture again?
Oh, sure. So they're maxed at 99 units, and they're planning on reducing that even further. Even with this, they're reducing it just because of costs related to parking structures and all those fun things.
But I guess, going back to Lisa's comment, I think it actually looks, it still looks wishy-washy, but I think it looks less like we are giving in to a developer if we just get rid of that requirement or go back to the original requirement rather than modifying it to meet this developer's concept, which has not come to us for approval anyway.
I think if this was purely a commercial property where we had a developer asking us to modify these changes, I don't think I'd be for that. But I think what we're doing is we're looking at what the RDA has looked at and envisioned, and we're trying to, make these changes. So what the RDA looked at, we could actually accomplish here. I had a thought too. I know I'm backtracking a little bit, but I'm sure they were shown multiple different projects from different developers, and they were all renderings, and I'm sure that they didn't have the exact amount of trees they needed for the code. They didn't have the exact colors that were required. There's probably lots of details on all those projects that probably didn't meet the exact code because they didn't have enough trees in the front or
I can
something.
give you a handful of violations right on these two pictures.
Yeah,
There's already things that are gonna have to be
These
amended.
are ideas, and that doesn't mean we have to approve this, but I think what was presented to the RDA was ideas, and the idea, this was the idea that was chosen. And I think we make I personally think we should just make the changes as written here, and I think that allows us to move forward the easiest. That's my opinion.
Zach, will you go back to what it says that notified or the notices were for affected entities? What does that mean?
So when we're dealing with certain properties, we have a list of affected entities that we need to send it to. And specifically because of the way this one's being brought, so the affected entities include cities, utilities, companies like that are impacted by this. And so we have that list of affected entities that we sent this notice to. And that's standard. Affected entities are sent to, what was that? State. It's a state requirement that affected entities are sent these notices.
So because this is a text amendment, is that why it's different than notifying surrounding properties situation?
Yeah, so the state mandates for conditional uses and zoning changes, how many notices, like the distance, like the circumference that we need to send notices to. And it specifically says that for something like a text amendment, so a code change, the state mandates that we send those to affected entities is the list that we need to send those to for something like this.
Well, can you
So-
tell us what the
So we
sign,
do have a different, on top of the affected entities, we also have to post it like on the state website. Like conditional uses, we don't have to post a notice on the state website, but we have to post one on the state website. We have to, it used to be, we have to do it in a paper. We don't have to do that anymore. But we make sure that text amendments are weird because there are certain cases where one text amendment will affect the entire city. So do you send a letter to all 50,000 residents of the city? And so the state recognizes that that's impractical. And so making it as publicly available as you can.
Well, I guess that's kind of my question, why? Because I do feel like some of the most vocal people about the MCCD are the residents that live close to this. And because we're changing a text amendment in the MCCD, I just wonder how noticed or informed they are that like we're actually making a change. I think that a lot of them had really strong feelings about what we did for this city hall and had a lot of input in the changes to this specific site. And so I know we're meeting the requirements, but I just wonder if affected entities actually informs the people that are the most opinionated about
Yeah,
it.
and also we do, so as part of the posting on the state website, there is the option to subscribe to those. So whenever there's something posted on there, you get notified of that. And then we also do post, like the packets and the agendas on our website as well. And you can subscribe to those as well. And I do know that a large portion of the people that are affected by the MCCD at all, the ones that often attend, are subscribed to those things.
I appreciate that effort, but I do have to giggle a little bit. I don't know, how many people get those notices? That's good. That they do. One sign company inquired about the changes. Can you tell us what their questions were? I mean, were they upset? Were they concerned? They just wanted to know how it affects the one sign company, they inquired about the changes.
No, they just wanted to clarify exactly what the changes were, and so we explained the numerical change to both the stories and the height. They were just asking to make sure they knew exactly what it was.
Staying informed, not really having an opinion.
And remind me, how tall is the vine? Or how many stories is it?
We know it's 7 stories, we think it's about 85 feet.
And I don't want you to speak for the RDA or for the community council, but there was a lot of pushback about the height of the vine, and a lot of people were really upset about that, and I'm just wondering, we went lower. I mean, I guess I don't even know what my question is. This will be the same height, 7 stories, but will maybe have a lower impact because of the grade of where the vine is and the whole reason they have to come back, because this part of the property is lower.
Is there any adjacent residential to the? I'm sorry, is there any adjacent residential property to this
Well, the vine.
area? I don't-
Just the vine, which is up at,
But it was, so it was built with this restriction, or was it
no,
before
it
this?
was before.
It was built to the MCCD requirements.
So they would
Before
really
they
have
changed
no
this.
objection to the 10-story requirement.
Right, yeah, because I mean, they built under the 7. I mean, they didn't have the same restriction.
Can you point on here on the map, the area that's included in this change?
It's highlighted.
It's all of the blue,
Or the blue
that's like
line?
outlined, yeah, in the blue.
So it's more than just that one property, well.
Yeah, it is, it's all properties that's east of State and south of Vine.
I mean, because we keep saying it's just this property, but actually there's others that could still be developed, right?
So
Right.
the code that we're changing specifically does mention located east of State Street and south of Vine, and that was the initial change that was made back in 2023. So we're just including all the parcels that were included when this change was originally made.
Which is why it was frustrating when it was originally come to us, because you can see how far south and how directly across from the hospital some of these properties are that would be subject to now only 7 stories versus the original MCCD 10 stories seems, I mean, on State Street, there's no, I mean, I can express my frustration that that went through originally, and it doesn't mean that I'm opposed to the 7 stories. I understand why we're doing this. My frustration is that we zoned a very small part of the MCCD for what I understood to be the potential redevelopment of the city hall. Why we limited all those properties around it also feels confusing to me. I don't understand why that happened. But now that we're in this position, I agree that, you know, either going to A or not, you know, voting for this change affects the RDA and affects the redevelopment of this. The part that I feel frustrated about is that I don't feel like my opinion would matter because it goes back to the city council, and they are the ones who asked for this change in the first place. So, I mean, I guess all I can do is express frustration of why we are here.
The other properties, I mean, I know you probably don't know every single plot here, but I know we have the Murray Theater. There's the big plot where the old city hall is. The other big lots, are those owned by Murray?
South of the project?
South of
No,
the project, they're not, none of those are?
just, so the only ones that the RDA owns are this one and this one.
Okay.
Well, I
Wait, isn't
lied.
the-
We just closed on this property and we own this property.
Isn't one of these owned by, isn't one of these where they're building the park?
Oh, wait. So it's not owned by the RDA,
The
but these are the
Armory?
pickleball courts for the park.
Okay. Yeah, the armory.
So
The
those aren't
armory is
going.
in,
The armory's
Oh,
over
it's
here
this. That's
in
there,
the,
okay.
Park.
yeah, something over here.
Yeah, so we are limiting other properties.
well,
there
this
for
is
sure.
boys,
thought
then
the
the
armory
red
was
is boys
part
and
of the
girls, so it would be that.
Yeah.
I thought the armory was part of the redevelopment.
No, the armory is an entirely separate thing. Yeah, the armory is,
I mean, so all
Right
of
there.
those.
Yeah, it's almost done. You should go walk by it. It looks really nice.
It's looking good.
I think we vote on it as it is, but I probably would be in support of just getting rid of it altogether. I'm fine either way, to be honest.
Well, that, I guess what I would propose is that we vote on the motion to just strike section F. If that fails, then we can talk about something else. So I make a motion.
Have we had the
Oh.
public hearing yet?
Sorry.
I guess we have not,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. I just want to make sure we're following rules.
Oh, well, and I'm probably jumping the gun, just because I have my own way of wanting to do this.
Okay, at this time, we will open this agenda item for public comment. If there's anyone that would like to speak to this. Have you received any email comments? Okay, then I will close the public comment period for more discussion or a motion.
Can we, before we make a motion, if we did make a motion to strike, what is it called?
F.
F.
17.170.120F. Is that what it is?
That is the only change that was made for these
Yes.
properties, is that correct? Just the F?
7 stories to 85 feet.
Then we'd have to move G to F, but I don't know.
You don't know? Oh, no,
I mean, what does that do other than it sends a message to the city council? But this would still go to them and they would still be the ones to approve.
Correct.
Yeah. It'd send a message or open us up to something that we weren't wanting in that area. Because look at the map in our discussion earlier, I think why there's problems and why they're trying the spot zone is because there is no buffer between the residential and MCCD on that map. And so when they built the first item, public went crazy because there
Well,
wasn't a
but-
buffer. So they came along and tried to make a buffer, which is not the right way to do things, no? We'll talk more to it
Well,
then.
there is still a requirement for a structure that's adjacent to a residential zoning district, but there isn't a residential zoning district except the
Those little-
Vine, which had the same restriction before.
Look at the map, all the gray little houses across the street from the Vine and next to, between the Vine and the ballpark. That's all residential right there in that gray area.
And it would have been subject to that same 35 feet if they were within that distance.
So there is a buffer.
Mhm.
Okay,
I think it's like 60 feet or something.
okay, so there is
Well,
a
it says the
buffer.
height of a structure located adjacent to a residential zoning district may not exceed 50 feet within 60 feet of the residential zoning.
Yeah,
district.
so 50 feet.
Okay, so there is a buffer, so.
All I can say is that there are some on the city council, and I know you guys are really chomping at the bit to get me to say something. So the only thing I can really say is that there are some on the city council that do not like height in a lot of zones. And so their request to staff at that time was to reduce it. And we still have the next agenda item that's gonna go over the form-based code. You will see that those heights have changed, or will eventually come out and be changed down the road, from the 10, 135 feet. And so it's something that a few of the city council people have felt very passionately about. So that's really all I can say.
I guess what I'm taking from that is if we strike F, I understand why I make a statement and why we get the job done, but if for some reason the builder's like not interested or like chomping at the bit to build more, and be like, great, we're changing the whole project.
No, they can't,
They can't because it's already gone through the RDA.
because they are subject to that sales agreement through the RDA.
So the only thing they could do is back out and start again.
They could back out, but then the city council, the RDA would have to go through another RFP process, and they could still pick something that is shorter. Like I said, it's the same thing. They could request they can pick a project that is only one story if they want.
So there's no downside, just making a statement.
Is there
I think,
a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we strike section F from 17.170.120 height regulations for the MCCD zone.
Can I make a point of order that we can't make a motion to strike it, but we can make a recommendation to strike it?
Yeah, we're forwarding a
Well,
recommendation of.
okay.
Uh,
Accept it.
Do we need-
recommend that it be stricken.
Okay, okay. How do we do that?
So, I mean, I think,
It's, we're approving or denying, so would you?
So you would-
You would forward a recommendation of denial?
so no, I think, there we go. Yay!
No parliamentarian, but I think what you would do is, if you're going to make that recommendation to strike F, you'd vote on that. If that's stricken, then I suppose you do another motion to make that recommendation to the council.
So then you're saying we would make a motion to forward a recommendation of approval without F?
Well, I think the first thing is you're just dealing with this issue of, does the planning commission want to, as part of their recommendation, strike F? So you'd have that discussion, and then strike F. And then if that's what the planning commission votes, you'd probably make another motion then to forward that recommendation on.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be two. Something like that, yes.
So it sounds, yeah, based on what we're hearing here is that the planning commission would make a motion to amend the proposed amendments to section 17.170.120F within the MCCD zone as reviewed in the staff report. You would make the vote, and then from there, you would forward a recommendation of approval to the city council for the proposed amendments as amended by the planning commission.
Who's on first?
I think that's overly complicating it, but if that's what you want to do.
Okay, so we already have a motion though.
So he would need to withdraw the motion and then restate. Because as it's worded right now, I don't think it's not, we don't have anything.
Okay,
Okay,
Do you want me to write out the motion?
no, I'm wondering why the motion can't be that we forward a recommendation to the city council
For the proposal.
to amend section 17.170.120 by striking section F within the MCCD zone.
Because if that doesn't pass, you don't have really any recommendation to forward on. Right?
I
So-
believe so.
Well, why, the commission can entertain another motion.
So actually, no, that would make the decision. That would make the decision of the approval or the recommendation of approval or denial for the staff, for the requested change. So you would need to make it, you'd have to make an amendment to what the request is. So city staff is requesting that you amend the text in F. If you want to change that, you have to make a motion to change it. And then forward a recommendation on that. If not, if you're just making a recommendation on striking F entirely, and if it fails, then you're sending a negative recommendation to the city council for staff's thing. Welcome to
You still
Robert's
haven't-
rules.
Well, but I understand Robert's rules. I don't know why a separate motion cannot be if that one fails,
Because if it fails, it's a recommendation of denial.
no,
Yes.
I don't understand why, sorry.
That's okay. You don't, I don't mean to be rude, but that's just the way it works. And
Well, that is not Robert's rules. If there's
we
something in
don't,
Robert's rules that
I
I need
don't
to
want to argue,
understand
I don't want to argue with you about it here at the dais. We can talk about it later. We've told you the process moving forward, so you can either do it that way, like withdraw your motion and make it the way we've talked about, or you can keep the motion as is.
I mean, I can,
Or if it sits here, it will fail for a lack of a second.
that's what I was gonna say. I can call for a second. Okay,
Okay, I'm willing to modify my motion, but I need to maybe understand exactly what the wording should be then.
Yeah, so based on discussion from legal and staff, the motion would be, the planning commission makes a motion to amend the proposed amendments to section 17.170.120F within the MCCD zone. To strike section F from chapter 17.170.120.
I so move.
okay.
That works.
We have, is there a second on that motion? Okay, seeing none, that motion fails.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Is there another motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead,
I
Michael.
just, doesn't, if we strike this or whatever we're doing here, doesn't that potentially delay development?
Well, we're just forwarding a recommendation to the city council. So the city council is actually the final decider about making,
So no.
so no, this would be to make a statement to the city council.
I mean-
Because they will,
Deciding whether we want to make a
Yeah.
statement.
we are deciding if we want to forward a recommendation that we approve these changes, or if we forward a recommendation that we don't approve these
Well,
changes.
Mayor, the answer to that could be yes, if we maintain the restrictions of 6 feet and 8 stories and they can't build within that.
And I will say that they will hear all of this because this is a public meeting and they also do get a copy of the minutes that get forwarded on with this report. So, yes, so you will get all of, they will hear what you guys had to say.
Madam Chair, I'm willing to make a motion to forward a recommendation of approval to the city council for the proposed amendments to section 17.170.120F within the MCCD zone as reviewed in the staff report.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Hersto and a second by Commissioner Pearson to forward a recommendation of approval to the city council for the proposed amendments to section 17.170.120F within the MCCD zone as reviewed in the staff report. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, we can call for a vote.
Commissioner Haristo,
Yes?
Commissioner Pearson,
Yes.
Commissioner Richards,
Yes.
Commissioner Milkovich.
As was, I appreciate the long discussion because it helps the public understand that we don't decide prior to the meeting. We think it through as well. Yes?
Commissioner Henry,
No,
Chair Patterson.
Because I was always in favor of higher height limits and more stories in this area, yes. Okay, motion passes. Agenda item number 7, discussion items and training about form-based code.
Oh, sorry, I guess I'll do an introduction. So Mark with VODA is here to kind of go over some of the progress that we've made on the form-based code. If you'll remember, we have 2 council members and Commissioner Richards that are on the steering committee. It's been kind of a form-based code week for us. Mark presented at the city council on Tuesday. We had our steering committee meeting yesterday, and now Mark is here again this evening to kind of just provide some updates on where we're at so far. So I think, is there an HDMI right there?
There is, I'm plugged in, so you may need to
I
change
think
input.
maybe.
Oof, magic.
Oh, wait. Hey, it shows there. Oh, now it's coming. There we go. Yay.
Okay. Great, thank you, Zach. It's good to be with you again. Like Zach mentioned, we just wanted to give an update on where we are with the form-based code. This process, we're trying to keep the pace moving pretty quickly. But I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to ask questions now that we're a few months into the drafting of the code. Michael has been in many of those meetings, so he will be your resident expert. Like Zach
Of water
mentioned-
features.
Water features. We've got some of the basics fleshed out. In form-based codes, there are certain sections that always end up being the major points of discussion. So we wanted to just get that in front of you at this point so that you can think about, process, get your questions together as far as when the day comes that we come back for adoption, that you've had an opportunity to talk through it. So I've got a presentation we'll go through. If you've got questions as we go along, by all means, let's talk through them. With a form-based code, one of the primary questions is how do we make the context appropriate? As this discussion you've had tonight about the MCCD zone, basically you've got one set of requirements for this entire district. With a form-based code, what we're doing is we're trying to modify that so that the context is what's driving those decisions. So one of the first things we do is develop a form district map. So this map in front of you divides up the city center area into sub-districts. So this is the closest corollary that you will have to a zone. So once a property owner comes in and says, I have a piece of property here in the city center area, first question we ask is, what form district are we talking about? Form district, in the tables of the form-based code, the requirements are really divided up by form district as you'll see. So we'll go through each of these form districts briefly and kind of talk broadly about the decisions that we've drafted. Take questions, input, any of those things that you'd like to talk through. So the first we'll talk about neighborhood corridor form district, and we just give these a name so that you've got an abbreviation so that it makes it easy to talk through. This really is the northwest corner of the city center area. These would be mostly properties that front onto 4800 South. These areas, one of the key questions that anyone is going to ask is height. We'll talk a lot about height tonight. With a form-based code, every parameter has a range. And so when you're looking at the form district, you'll say, okay, your minimum height is 2 stories, your maximum height is 3 stories. That's the range that a new project would need to fall within. With a form-based code, use is very flexible. It's open to proposal from property owner. It's really more market-driven. What pencils in 2024, 25, in 10 years, it may be something completely different. We're in a point where housing seems to pencil everywhere, as long as you build it densely enough. So giving yourself a lot of flexibility. The form-based code is meant to look out for the next 25, 30 years. So we need to have that flexibility built into the code. The second form district really is here, kind of the heart, the center of the city center area, where this building sits is kind of at the epicenter of all of that. This we call the Civic Center Form District. The heights in this area would fall between 3 and 6 stories. We'll talk in a minute about 2 ways that form-based codes regulate height. It's not just stories, but also the height of individual floors, which we'll talk about. One of the key, I would say this building would be a catalytic project for your city center. You've built this enormous, beautiful plaza to the south here. What we now need are reasons to be in this area. I've been to this building many, many times now, and I dare say I've never seen a person out in that plaza. So what we're looking at is what land uses are happening in this area. You can imagine if there's an apartment building across the street with 150 units, there's always going to be someone out there walking their dog, reading a book. How do we activate this as a city center area? Concentration of use. So we have these, images of people enjoying public spaces. The Boulevard Farm District is what we've called the State Street corridor. This corridor, historically, this is kind of the heart of Murray. It's changed drastically. The economics of main streets are wildly different than they were when Murray's center was built along State Street. In the discussions we've been having, applying additional architectural requirements so that new development and old development feels compatible. Setting a maximum height of 3 stories, which would be compatible with most of the development along State Street, which is 2 and 3 stories in height. We've had some discussions this week about allowing 5 stories with a little bit of a setback. Very briefly, we talked about this in our meeting yesterday. You can have a 3-story maximum along State Street where if someone is at street level or traveling down State Street, you're going to perceive that scale as this is 3 stories in scale. You can see in this image, you've got a setback of, we'll say 10 or 15 feet that is kind of hiding that 4th story. And there are many examples of how you could do that in a way that you could have some additional height while also keeping that context of historically buildings along State Street were in that 2 and 3 story height range. So,
Can I ask you a question about that?
of course.
So the way the MCCDs are in currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that heights west of State Street are different than heights east of State Street, buffering that neighborhood. But now, as it looks, it wouldn't matter, right? So somebody could go east of State Street and add on to the Desert Star 5 stories back closer to the residence
With that setback from
State Street.
From State Street.
So there's
correct.
no delineating like closer to residents and farther than from residents as it was before.
There is, and we'll keep going through the form
Okay.
districts. We've got a kind of a form district that's intended to kind of mitigate, I
Okay.
think, what your question is. But that's a great question. Again, each form district, what we're trying to figure out is, okay, what context makes sense here? How do we make sure that we're sensitive to existing communities and so forth?
No, I think it's great. I think that I actually always disliked that East and West State Street were zoned so differently, the heights and everything. And I understood why they were trying to protect the residents because, I mean, as we just discussed, in west of State Street, you could be 135 feet.
Sure.
So that's, I think, what the thinking was. But yeah, this corridor, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and that, you've done some planning work recently, a strategic plan for some of this area. On our team has been Levenger and his team, and it seemed like the consensus during that project was 3 stories along State Street was solid, everyone supported that. The reason why we need to talk about additional height is in order for projects to pencil, getting in that additional density can be the difference between something that is going to work or something that won't work.
Which is why this is a really good compromise, because I was really frustrated with, 3 stories on State Street. How do we get anything
Right.
done?
Right.
That would get stuck, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this is great.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the public open house we had a few weeks ago, but there was a woman there who was going from board to board, and she was saying, all parking needs to be structured, all parking needs to be buried. So I had a conversation with her, like, well, that is very expensive. And so in order to accomplish that, if we don't want to use up your entire city center with parking lots, we have to allow for some additional height. So when we're talking about Block 1, you've got some need for parking structure, something that's going to cost quite a bit of money. How do we pay for that? How do we make sure that, it's not an albatross if we start doing things like that?
I think that is so interesting. I went to those, a couple of those open houses too, where we're trying to kind of divide and have the walkability on East and West because, they're just really, there's not a good way to unite them. And I also saw those same things. I saw people say, oh, well, I only want 3 stories on 48th and State, but I'm really frustrated that the parking is all behind that and there's just a giant parking lot. And it's like, okay, but you can't do both. You can get buried parking because you have height and density, right? That offsets the cost of that. So I saw a lot of those same comments. I thought that was so interesting that those two wants are in conflict with, I think, a lot of people.
Indeed, and I think that's a good observation that they are in conflict. This particular woman and her friend who were there, they said, we tried to go to Holidays Town Center and there wasn't enough parking, and so we left. One of the interesting things about Holidays Town Center, they were having these same discussions where they were going to go to 5 and 6 stories. Everybody lost their minds. They kept it at 2. And with 2 stories, you can't structure your parking. You've kind of pulled the rug out from underneath yourselves. And so Holidays Town Center is only going to be what it's going to be. And it may work for that context. I think your context here is wildly different. You've got rail access, you've got freeway access, you've got a lot of assets here that they do not. And so I think figuring out, okay, what's the right context, what's the right height for these areas? And again, this is 30 years of development.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the part that going to those meetings, I also kind of felt stuck and frustrated a little bit is because we're lowering the density and the amount of people that are going to naturally be in the area. That means to go to a restaurant or something that's here, you now have to drive because there aren't enough people around to keep those things in business. Very much like Holiday. If you go and you can't find parking, then you don't go to that restaurant, right? And so I saw on a lot of those boards too, kind of again, we're pulling from these two. I saw a lot of people say, we love Holidays downtown, right? And that's exactly the problem. You have to drive to get there. There is no one else around there. It's very difficult to walk from that area. But also, we are located so close to a rail line. This is why I'm really excited that we're going to form-based code, but I do feel, maybe because I've been here for this whole process, that because of where we are, we're kind of stuck, right? Like we had ways to encourage more density in this area. And then now we've really rolled back almost all of the ways you're going to do that.
Yeah, I think you've got a ton of opportunity here. And I think that the support of that density from the public meeting, like it was very well supported, the kind of density approach that we were taking here. But I think it's a conversation, when you have a community that has been kind of a one-story suburban community for the last 100 years, having a city center of this scale is just kind of a difference in thinking.
Yeah.
How do we maximize this space? I think this economically could be quite a powerhouse for the city, where right now it's not necessarily. And so making sure that we're just not giving ourselves too low of a ceiling that you're going to develop and then it's just not going to be enough to
No,
really do
I
it.
mean, I really think it's perfect. I think we almost, back when the NCC was put in, we made like almost too big of a jump. We made too big of an ask
Yeah.
for some of the residents that they just could not get on board. So I think that
Yeah.
this will be a really good compromise.
Yeah, I think that's great. At the end of the day, economics decides the heights of buildings. So we need to recognize, there's a range that's kind of a sweet spot for construction. The heights that we give here, again, you give a range so that whatever works for that property, what its sale price is, what the construction costs are, they're different for residential and office and hotel. Making sure that we are providing enough flexibility that what pencils in 5, 10, 15 years is still gonna work. So, okay,
So, well, wait a minute, go back to that a minute, please.
sure.
We just spent a good amount of time talking about height restrictions
Sure.
in a piece that's just adjacent to this.
I think it is this. That corner is where we
Alright.
just rezoned.
Right,
Well,
this
and
south,
You've already got a 7-story building in that zone. Why are we dropping the height restriction so much over the total? I mean, maybe I could understand on this Boulevard Form District, but in the previous one in the Civic Center, right now it's 10 stories, 135 feet, and you've got it down to 6, right?
so you want to go higher is what you're saying?
Because the
Well,
public will love it and we can build
I
it.
guess I'm wondering, is that just driven by the public input at this point?
Well, I think what we've proposed from, at least from the open house that we had with property owners, that was well supported. Just because we say 10 stories doesn't mean a 10-story building could pencil for
Well,
the,
Well, sure, but just because you say we're going to restrict it to 6 stories doesn't mean you're going to be able to make it economically feasible either.
sure. Yeah, but there's political feasibility. If the public doesn't, support what you're proposing, that makes it a lot more challenging to adopt a code. But I hear what you're saying.
I think that's, at least for the total district, that seems like a pretty big change from what's already there, and in fact, from at least one building that's existing and another one that we just talked about.
I think
They're
it'll be,
both outside of that.
but it'll be a good change. I think the public will, because we've been trying to develop this area forever. I think this is something that will take, it'll have feet, it'll move.
And that's the thing I was gonna say is 10 stories was allowed, right? Doesn't mean anyone was
Well,
gonna
doesn't
build
mean they
10
have
stories.
to.
But block 1, all of the surveys and everything that they did came back that they want 3 stories, right? So that's why I feel like this is actually like a good compromise, right? Because nothing is getting done because the public, and they're telling the city council, we don't want that, right? So we've been stuck for a while. And so I do feel like moving this way, it's supporting what the public wants, but making it actually viable that something could get built and developed there.
Well, and I guess what I'm saying is, look at what's already there, is already outside this range and has been approved and found acceptable.
It was
Make it
fought pretty
economic.
hard.
What's that?
The Vine was fought very, very hard. A lot of residents did not
Well,
like the
now
7
we
stories.
just bumped up the height on the property adjacent to this to 7 stories again.
Agreed.
Or we're recommending that we do.
You're observing the struggle that's been occurring for a
Yeah,
very long
you're
time.
witnessing the exact pickle that we are
Welcome
in
to
for.
40 years of
for
dealing
a
with this
four-big
downtown.
code.
All I'm saying is, why are you trying to restrict it more than what you've already
It's the correction,
allowed
so
to go
something will
through?
actually
And I'm
happen.
not, when I say you or we, whatever, I mean just the city in general. You've
Well, because
already got
we're trying to
something.
balance 2 things, right? We're trying to balance what
You're already a little bit pregnant.
what was that?
You've already exceeded those things, and it's been approved.
It's been fought by the city council has adamantly been very upset about 7 stories. And the public is telling them, we do not want this high, and they're the ones who vote them in. So
The
two,
city council is the one that just requested that we change.
right,
the
and
zoning
you
to
can
go
see
to
why I was really frustrated
And
at that other agenda
and
item.
that is why I voted against it, not because I'm against that height for the 7 stories, it's because we're going back and forth on this.
Yes, yes,
You're right, but let it
Ridiculous.
happen.
exactly, exactly.
You're right, but this
But-
is what's needed to happen
and-
all along in those arguments.
And this is why, I do feel like I said earlier, we have two things in conflict that people want.
Sure.
And
And people aren't considering both sides of it.
they're
gonna
not,
get
but
what
that's
they
what
want.
this is actually
This is the
bridging that
this is
gap.
the
This
compromise.
is the way we get there, right? We get there from making something pencil and what people want to actually having a
Well,
way for them to do
And
it.
that's why I say, on this boulevard district, I can understand that. Where they've done what you're proposing, or what you're suggesting on that civic center area. That's back away from the street, that's further away from residents,
Which is why it can go higher.
but it can't.
It can go to 6. This can
Well,
go
it
3 to
six,
5.
But right now it can go to 10.
Right, but, okay, we gotta get 10 out of our minds because no one wants
Well,
it and nobody
okay,
will
I-
develop it.
But somebody wants 7, so I can at least say we ought to be at 7.
You're absolutely right, but you're late to the conversation.
I was gonna say,
You're absolutely right.
I get how you got there, but on the other side of that, that's why we're here, is because we couldn't get there. We got one building in, we got the Vine in, and it was
And
hated.
you're looking at the redevelopment.
Because of the Vine, and I don't know if this is true, but because of the Vine, I think that was a big motivator about why they came and asked for lower heights at the city hall. They were very upset about how tall that was.
So in the end, I mean, I'm
The
excited
10
about this. I think
10 stories or the
Yeah,
7
7.
they want now?
the 7. I'm excited about this
That's why they
project.
came back and said 6 only.
But now they've said 7.
Well, they messed up on what they accepted, yes.
So you're absolutely right. I'm excited about this project. I think it might actually have people, it might actually go somewhere, it might actually have some really good development. And in the end, we'll have 2 eyesores that don't fit with the big plan. I say quote eyesores, it's an opinion, because in the end, we'll have the Vine and we'll have the building we were just discussing that are taller than everything else. Yes, it's very true.
And they're on the side where it ought to be shorter.
But just keep moving. We have to keep moving forward because this is a good idea, even if there's an error in it. This is a good idea. And because that's, the discussion we've been having for like last 9 years is this. We need to get to this. That's why there's been argument and nothing's happened, because we need to get to this.
Yes. Because we keep running into these conflicts.
And I
That-
guess maybe I have my own ideas about what a city center ought to be, but.
That's
if they-
exactly-
If you want it walkable and it's not.
Exactly, that's
it's not
exactly the
gonna be
pickle we are stuck in. We are stuck in the pickle that we all understand. If we want it walkable and we want it to be a city, we need more density, which is why they wrote it for that height. But we cannot get anything developed because everybody is clashing against what they want, which is 3 stories. And so that's, you just encapsulated how we got here.
Great, well, let's keep moving. The Boulevard Farm District, I think with State Street and its visibility, that's why we've approached it in this way, to say we can get some height. So if you've got a frontage, if you're going up to 4 stories, you have to set back a certain amount. If you're going up to 5, set back a little bit more. Again, just to get us there with that density while keeping with that historic context of what's happening on State Street. And I think once more of this happens, I think the Vine will definitely stick out a lot less when there are things around it that are closer in height.
When I was historic and we're sitting here in a postmodern.
The district that is, we'll say, what we've drafted is the highest, or potentially the tallest district, we're calling the Transit Neighborhood District, which is really southwest corner, closer to rail service, closer to Intermountain Campus. We've actually revised this, so it's 4 stories minimum, 8 stories maximum. Kind of surprisingly, in the public open house, that seemed to be completely acceptable. The idea here is that this part of the city center may be primarily residential and office mix. That would really start to develop the city center as a job center and a residential center. This might be where you can get much more density for more residents who will populate the city center, the people who will be doing the walking, the restaurants, and so forth. That mix, I think where you allow for that taller potential, that mix we're hoping will have some correlation with what's going on the property outside of the city center, where IMC owns a whole bunch of surface parking lots that seem like the surface of the moon when you're crossing them, but really there's a lot of potential there for additional building once the time comes. And maybe to answer your question from earlier, we've got this yellow form district kind of buffering that boulevard district from the residential areas to the east. We call, actually, it's called residential transition. We got the wrong title on this slide. The residential transition form district would really be that buffer area where we're looking at 2- and 3-story height. It would probably be something like row houses, townhomes, that sort of thing. We had an interesting conversation with city council the other night where they were saying this, this west side of, this is Center Street. This west side of Center Street currently is in the MCCD zone. We took it out because we thought these are single-family homes. Rosalba Dominguez the other night, who lives, is she on the other side of Center? Okay. She was saying that everyone on the west side is kind of the mind that, oh yeah, in 20 years, this will probably be something else related to the city center. So she was supportive of moving that line back over to Center Street. So we shall discuss if that should happen. And again, that's intended, if you do have something that were 5 stories, set back from State Street, you would have something that might be more of the 2- or 3-story range, kind of there on the perimeter of the district.
Okay, I understand like how on 48th or on Vine, which, I mean, we just talked about the NOAA the other day, which is 7 stories. So, but like some of these interior properties, how do they get redeveloped? They don't have like a road to them or anything.
You'd have to develop access, and it may be,
Okay.
I think a developer is probably gonna come along and assemble 3 or 4 parcels in order to do what they need to do.
Okay,
And then the code has kind of allocations for introduction of a new street to access those.
yeah, that's really interesting because I don't know if they've ever been considered separately.
I assume where you've drawn these borders between these districts is just conceptual at this point, especially if you're talking about maybe moving that back over to center.
Correct. It's all make-believe at this point.
Well, yeah, I know, but I'm just looking at that one specifically.
But I think we may consider moving that line so that those, rather than carving out, okay, these people are kind of left in that MCCD zone, even though the rest of the city center isn't in that zone anymore, it may make sense to move that line back.
Oh, they would be left in the old MCCD zone?
We hadn't decided what would happen, if it would,
okay.
if we would rezone them to like R18, or if we would
I mean,
put them,
I think
leave
it,
them in MCCD. We hadn't decided yet.
I see. I think, I mean, there's an argument either way, right? To protect those houses in that neighborhood, right? Which is one of the goals of the general plan. Leaving it R18 would be good. I think if you do expand and then some of these, 2-story things face that neighborhood as a little bit more of a communal area, because, right now they're, I don't know.
Yeah, because right now they're all zoned MCCD on that Center Street.
Got it.
Yeah, so if we moved it over, they would still be in that residential transition area. We would keep them part of that form district. So, what you could possibly see is maybe like some sort of cottage court subdivision, or something smaller scale along that line where Center Street becomes.
You've got a minimum 2 stories there.
Yeah, and, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Like-
So
like-
those are the 5 form districts as currently drafted. Again, the height, as we have established, is always a long discussion. we've got a graphic that we've developed that basically shows, if you were to max out height in every one of these parcels, what are we talking about? So we've got each of those form districts, with the kind of parameters, the minimums and maximums for the stories. In a form-based code, floor height is also separately regulated, and so you have a different height, maximum, minimum and maximum for a ground floor, where you want a little bit more height, and then a minimum and maximum for upper floors. So what we've done here is basically shown, okay, at a minimum, development would be in this column, the maximum would be what's going on in this column. And that again is if someone, pushes what the absolute maximum would be. We don't show, the interiors of blocks are empty here. We don't show, if someone were to do a five-story building with the setback, what that might look like. But you can kind of see conceptually where that concentration is, that really the residential density, office density concentration is closer to the rail service. The things along State Street are more in line with what the historic, kind of historic height ranges would be. And then here in kind of Civic Center area, you've got some additional height to activate the center of the place. This is a really, broad brush we're painting here just so that you can kind of see graphically the approach we've taken with the height parameters. So, questions about that? So far, so good. And this is they have this in the packet? No, okay. Zach will send this to you and you can print this out and put it on your kitchen table and draw on it. I wanted to do a quick summary of the public open house we had on the 16th. We invited property owners in the city center area to come in and ask questions. Form-based code is very much in the weeds, and so we wanted them to have an opportunity to come in and kind of talk through what their thoughts are. I think the takeaway was that generally the height ranges that we had proposed and the way that we were proposing them was generally supported. There were certainly people who just came in to say, I don't want any apartments anywhere, and there will always be those people. What we're looking at is what are the things we need to do in order to achieve the goals of the general plan, create a vibrant city center, make a walkable place, all of those things. There were some really good ideas and comments that we gathered during the open house. Additionally, had some one-on-one interviews with property owners that they were invited to come in and kind of sit down and talk a little more at length about those things. So this, again, we'll make sure Zach gets this to you so you can kind of see this. This is just a summary of that open house and kind of the things that we heard. Great. With that, I just wanted to open it up, and if you've got questions, we can talk through. We've got a prototype document that we can refer to if you have specific questions about the form-based code and how it works, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to ask some additional questions.
I just have a quick question about usage.
Mhm.
Like, you're saying the usage is open?
Flexible, we'll say
flexible.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Like, I want to come develop something. How does my use get approved?
Sure. So we'll skip forward to use. Use we put last because that's sort of once you've established all of the form things. Generally, use is regulated by ground floor and upper floor. Each form district has a table that basically says, here are acceptable, approvable ground floor uses, here are acceptable, approvable upper floor uses.
Okay, so similar to like a zone is already,
Well, yeah.
but by,
Far more flexible.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in a city center area, that ground floor use and the upper floor use, that's really vital that you get right. If, you fill all of this area with apartment buildings that only have a leasing office on the ground floor, it's not gonna be a city center.
So there'll still be approved uses when there'll be conditional uses as well?
Yes.
So maybe.
Maybe.
So largely, one of the things that you'll notice is that you don't see very many conditional uses in the MCCD zone. the current MCCD zone as it's written right now is very flexible. There are very little things that are conditional and only a handful that are not. There's a few things that are not permitted, but largely there is a very wide availability of permitted uses. I don't even think we've ever taken a conditional use for an MCCD, at least since I've been here. So we will be moving away from more of those conditional uses in the MCCD. It'll either be a permitted or not permitted, pretty much.
Because I could see in like the areas, what are they called? Not areas, whatever they're called.
The form district.
The farm district.
Yeah.
Like if I'm in the more residential one, we still may want to allow non-residential things, but maybe we would want those conditional based on where they're going. I don't know. I don't need to talk about it more. I know we've done long already.
Yeah.
My question was answered, so I
No,
appreciate it.
and that's a good question. The code, as you'll see eventually, there's a table for each form district that says, okay, here are the allowed uses. It is quite broad. It's, retail, office, I'd say less specific than
Okay.
what a traditional zoning code
I see.
might have.
And even less specific than a Murray City Code. A Murray City Code, so I will pontificate for just a moment. I apologize, I know it's late, but Murray City Code, we use a thing called the Standard Land Use Code. You see those 4-digit numbers. It associates with a book that lists out tables or tons of uses from the 70s. Murray and Provo are the only two cities, I think, in the state, definitely in Utah and Salt Lake County, that still use a standard land use code. Nobody uses that anymore. They are much more broad, and this is actually going to be the first step in eliminating the standard land use code, to broaden that out so that, because really what we should be looking at is use as an impact to the area, not necessarily, kind of like, it doesn't matter. Anyway.
I guess,
But,
yeah. I don't want to keep going on about this because we can talk about it later in a further meeting, but I'd just like to understand at a future meeting, maybe.
Sure.
Like if it says retail, well, does that mean I can put a sex shop anywhere that it says retail?
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the
Because
short
that's
answer is
retail.
no. Yeah,
So again, I don't need this whole all explained to me right now.
no, but that's a good question. I think currently you're very familiar with use is the way that you control what's going on. With a form-based code, it recognizes that uses come and go. You've got a building, it's gonna get used over and over again. A restaurant might be there for 10 years, but then it'll leave and something else. The things that are difficult to change are what we're focusing on, the building, the form, where it's cited. The use, we're gonna talk about, but it's far more broad. There is still, in the use chapter, there's a list of forbidden uses. There are things about, uses that are a little more challenging, cannabis, tobacco retailers, things like that are still regulated and forbidden in certain instances. So we're not opening the barn doors completely, we're just saying, it'll be fine. But yeah, the code itself, as I mentioned, the focus really is on, okay, where is the building sited? Where is the parking located? What are those heights? What are the articulation of architecture? Things like that. The prototype document that you'll see when Zach sends this to you, we've chosen a specific parcel, the Wells Fargo here on the corner of Vine and State, really to say, okay, if this particular parcel were to redevelop, how would that actually, what are the questions that we would ask? What are the height limitations? What are those options? What could those buildings look like? These are not architectural guidelines. We're not saying the architecture has to be any specific thing, which is why we've kind of shown two very different architectural styles, that if a property owner really wants to do something, of their own style, they're free to do that as long as it meets these requirements.
maybe you're getting to this, but parking has been a huge conflict in the MCCD.
Indeed.
And we've, talking about wishy-washy, we've like gone back and forth and changed the parking like multiple times or whatever. What does that look like in form-based code?
Usually with a form-based code, depending on how brave a city feels, they'll get rid of minimums and set maximums. I'm not saying that you need to get there as a city. I don't know that I've had a city I've worked with who feels comfortable enough to go to a parking maximum. It's the same thing where there are parameters where you have a minimum and a maximum for parking.
But we're not calculating, because like the way we were doing it before was like every space was calculated for every spot, right? Except in the MCD, we're actually like, well, no parking.
Well, I would say it's pretty similar to what the current MCCD code does, where you've got, certain number of stalls per housing unit, certain number of stalls
Okay.
per retail square footage. Generally with form-based code, you're trying to put more of the onus on the property owner or the developer to determine how much parking they need.
Okay.
Form-based codes also strongly encourage shared parking, where you recognize that a residential parking infrastructure that is used from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., it is mostly empty all day. An office building is used from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then it's empty. How do we figure out how to make sure that waste, basically you have all of this capacity that's being wasted? Form-based code tries to move in that direction to figure out, okay, how can we make sure that this parking, which is very expensive, can be used as many hours of the day as possible.
But I'm sure there's a whole other discussion too, but the problem with that thought is in this desire to change how we commute and how far we travel for things. And so we increase the density in this area with commercial on the bottom. They're supposed to stay there and go downstairs to work, or stay there and go downstairs to shop. So their car should stay there until they stop having the car. So using the.
We're not there yet, but.
But maybe
yeah.
that's not a problem, because then the 8 to 12 parking lot won't be available, but no one's coming to it, they're all walking, so maybe,
Right.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the shared parking is a complicated calculation. Mill Creek City went through, it probably took them a year to come up with a shared parking agreement with their own city hall and development around it, but they got there. Basically recognizing that there's certain times when specific uses peak, and then, they don't need it necessarily so much. But, yes, parking is a long conversation. We're all a little over it tonight, but next time I come back, we'll talk about parking a little bit more. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on kind of what we've been doing and where we are.
Generally speaking, on a form-based code, is there any downsides to it?
Well, there's a downside to everything,
Well,
but.
What are they?
I would say form-based code, sometimes if you have developers who aren't used to using them, sometimes they can be a little unsure of it or uneasy about it. One thing that is good about a form-based code in Utah is that we have a dozen plus cities that have been using a form-based code for several years. So we can kind of look to them to learn some best practices. So we've been communicating with other cities to kind of understand what are the pinch points or what are the things that they've modified in their form-based code, and make sure that we're implementing that in, what we're drafting here.
At the same note, hopefully the developers have been developing there and learned how to develop there. They'll come to us
Yeah.
informed.
And there are plenty of developers now in Utah who are very familiar with form-based code, and they will seek out places that have form-based code because they know exactly what's being asked of them. One of the reasons that we put the prototype document together is so that you can have some specifics to say, okay, here is what this means. If a developer has 200,000 words of municipal code that they're trying to interpret, that's not really doing anyone any favors. Form-based code is meant to be a lot more user-friendly, that you as a planning commission know the questions that are going to be asked, the property owner knows the questions that they will be asked. It just gives it a little bit more predictability, and it's very context sensitive. This isn't a form-based code that you were just picking up from somewhere else and dropping here. We're calibrating it to the needs of the city center.
I'm still trying to understand this concept and absorb it completely,
Sure.
but this helps. This is good. I like this. But I guess going back to that question again, is there a situation where the form-based code allows something to come in, but maybe people are going to regret or
Sure. It's
that
not,
wouldn't happen under the other type of coding?
well, it's not.
I don't even know how to ask that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a silver bullet. It's not a magical process that suddenly things aren't going to happen that the city may regret, but that's how cities work. There's always some push and pull there. But I think what it does.
Make it more or less likely, I guess.
I think it's, again, we're trying to get more predictability out of it, to say, okay, we know what we're asking for and we know what we're going to get. But if you are interested more in form-based code, there's 1 million hours of YouTube videos if you would like to watch some TED Talks on form-based code.
Send me the links that you watched.
Yeah. Good, well, thank you for your time, appreciate it. I'll make sure Zach sends this along to you so you can process it at your own pace. Michael's been in all our meetings, so if you do have questions, he has all the answers to those questions.
Very much not an expert, but I'll.
He won't stop sabotaging us and wants water features everywhere. He just wants to turn this into a water world, so it's fine.
Few things.
Everybody likes a water feature. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further business?
Yeah, you have another training.
Oh,
Turn the page.
Where's dinner?
There is nothing more exciting after 2 hours of a meeting than a training on the Open and Public Meetings Act.
I ended
does
it on the open and public meetings training, so.
I know, I saw the discussion and training and then, yeah. Does anyone need a recess? Do you need a little break?
We
Or
will
are
be
we good?
quick. I'll be quick, but if
He's-
we need a break,
okay.
if you need a break,
30
we can take it.
seconds?
Huh?
30 seconds?
You need,
I'm,
I can do it in 30 seconds.
I know, I'm trying to see. Hey, Tino, did that switch back to the, sorry, yeah, it needs to switch back to the thingy. Aha.
Okay, like I said, I will be quick. This is the Open and Public Meetings Act training that you are required to take every year. So Zach, you can, the state law requires that every public body receive training on the Open and Public Meetings Act. I know some of you have heard this many times, some of you have not. Unfortunately, there's no real changes from last year. That didn't change the code, so it'll be pretty similar. But the reason behind the Open and Public Meetings Act is just that you can go to the next one, Zach, sorry. That the purpose is that the state's business or the political subdivision business be done open and publicly, so that the public has a chance to see it and to be involved in the process. It's just a transparency thing. So openly refers to every portion of a meeting needs to be open to public observation. Now, the public has the right to observe. They don't necessarily have the right to participate in every meeting unless they're expressly invited to do so, like when we have a public comment period. But they are allowed to be in and see how those discussions go and how you get to your decisions. So a meeting is defined as a convening of a public body with a quorum present for the express purpose of essentially doing something that this body has a authority to act on. So receiving public comment on a relevant matter, deliberating about something, taking action or a vote. So we've talked about this before, that social gatherings, if 4 of you happen to run into each other out in public, doesn't necessarily justify or constitute a meeting unless you start to talk about something that's on your agenda or an item that could come before you. You could turn a social gathering into a public meeting. So again, try not to, I know you'll run into each other and want to talk more about the form-based code, but just don't violate the Open and Public Meetings Act. So quorum is defined as a simple majority unless the statute stated otherwise. For the Planning Commission, that's 4 of you. That creates a quorum. The Open and Public Meeting Act requires notice to the public, obviously. We publish a list each year of the regularly scheduled meetings, and then give at least 24 hours of notice before each meeting with an agenda that you've seen with the date and time, and it's posted in places that are seen by the public on the public notice website. Emergency situations, again, I can't see too many emergencies that the planning commission would have, but you could, in emergencies, you can do away with the 24-hour notice if needed, but I don't think that'll be an issue for this. The agenda needs to be enough that somebody could look at it and understand what will be discussed or what items will come before the planning commission. So each topic listed on the agenda is to be addressed. Sometimes the question comes up, what if an issue comes up that's raised that's not on the agenda? Can it be addressed? The code points out that at the chair's discretion, a non-agenda item that's brought up can be discussed if needed, but no action can be taken on something that's not on the agenda, so.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that? I got scolded one time by the public because we had moved like an agenda item that was at the bottom of the agenda to the top of the agenda. And we didn't notice about it, I guess. I don't know. What, if it's listed on the agenda, does it have to go in that order? Is there a difference in, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, again, to me, it's the time, the time and the place have to be on there. I think I know in the past we have moved items
Okay,
for various reasons, so
So that was okay that we,
it might upset
Move.
someone who now has to sit here for 2 hours when they thought they'd only have to sit here
Right.
for 20 minutes, but
yeah, that's
it
why they were.
doesn't
were-
violate the open and public meeting
Okay.
Act, at least, so.
Cause I was like, he was like, you didn't notice that there was a change to it, and I was like, I don't know.
There are provisions in the Open and Public Meetings Act for when a meeting can be closed. Again, I cannot see a situation in which the planning commission would need to go into a closed meeting, but just be aware that there is a process that has to be followed to go into a closed meeting, which it has to be a regularly scheduled meeting, a quorum has to be present, and the 2/3 of those present need to vote to have it be closed. There are various reasons that you could close a meeting. They're listed in statute. Again, I can't see any of these applying to the planning commission, so I don't see too many situations in which there would be a closed meeting. Just know, if ever a situation comes up where you would be required to have a closed meeting, we will walk you through it and make sure that we follow it correctly, so. Minutes of a closed meeting are kept, but those are restricted and protected under grandma, so. Electronic meetings, this was something that became much bigger and more popular during COVID. Electronic meetings with an anchor location, meaning you're still meeting here, but maybe one of you wants to meet electronically, are allowed if this body has passed a rule to allow that. I don't believe the planning commission has, so that's not something you'll need to worry about. However, where COVID came in, electronic meetings without an anchor location can occur still if the chair determines that it would place a substantial risk to the health and safety if we all met together. This is what happened during COVID. They have changed it now that the determination to have an electronic meeting was only good for 30 days, whereas during COVID it was much longer. But again, hopefully we don't ever have to deal with electronic meetings again like that. And finally, just,
Can I ask a question real
Yeah.
quick? Right now we're broadcasting this meeting, and we always do. We always ask for people to email their public comments in. Is that a requirement? Are we required to take public comment from people remotely viewing this meeting? Or is that just something we're doing because we,
I think that's just something we're doing. Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe our city council recently
Yeah,
changed their rules to not.
That was something that, I'm glad you brought it up, because you can't make a decision right now, obviously, but it's because we literally just were told that we can't have a decision. But that is something that I wanted to bring up, is whether we wanted to continue that practice. And I think we'll probably move away from it, largely because COVID has faded quite a bit. People are kind of back to normal. And you remember a few months ago, we had a discussion on rules and the bylaws for you guys. Now that things have finally kind of settled down a little bit in our office, a tiny bit, just a tiny bit.
Settled down.
I have some I have staff that I can pass some stuff off to that we can actually start working on getting an update to
Because
those.
if they're not gonna make the meeting, they can still make comment, right? They can still send a comment in.
Oh, for sure.
But we just.
Just not at
Yeah.
the meeting. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't think we've actually ever received one, at least in the past year or two, in the middle of a meeting. They've always come beforehand. Okay, sorry.
Awesome.
So with regards to enforcement, the code does allow, if someone is willfully disrupting a meeting, they can be removed, if that is an issue. Any action taken in violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act can be voided by a court. And then, one thing for you to just be aware of and to remember is, any member of the public body who knowingly or intentionally violates the Open and Public Meetings Act could be charged with a Class B misdemeanor, so don't do that, so.
Who removes them?
I'm sorry?
Who removes them?
Yeah, that's a good question. You would ask them to leave, I suppose, and if they didn't, you'd maybe have to escalate it, but.
Marin and Lisa probably remember this. We have had a couple of meetings in the past where we've asked an officer to be here because we knew that they were going to be very contentious. It wasn't obviously here, but at the old city hall. And sometimes they did get rowdy. I don't think we've actually had someone escorted out.
No, but I think just having the officer there, people are a little bit
People
more
a little more
on,
calm.
yeah, their best behavior.
But we have had an officer. I think we've actually had one during a meeting here. I think we've asked an officer. They just sat in plain clothes in the back, pretty much.
But are you able to connect with someone pretty quickly?
Oh, yeah.
When you prepare
Tra-
beforehand.
Travis Ney wanted a button, if you remember right. He wanted a button up here we could just push.
I am surprised they didn't do a panic button somewhere in
Yeah, I
here.
would think that.
Because we have one in CED that they just installed.
I guess just what it comes down to is do everything transparent and you'll be fine, so.
I do have a quick, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I had a quick question because you mentioned our ability to participate remote. And I thought we discussed several times in the past, we've said that's an option. And even with this meeting, I think Ned was saying he could participate
Yeah, I was thinking the
remote
same
if
thing.
need be. So is that something we need to discuss in the future and add a rule around?
That's what, that was one of the things that I wanted to say in addition to the public comment is that I couldn't find anything in the rules when we reviewed it, because we all looked at the bylaws together. It would be in the bylaws, that it would be allowed, and I don't remember seeing it in there. But that doesn't mean that we can't add it in the future.
Just as a way to get to a quorum if we don't have a
Yeah,
quorum,
yeah.
my question, and you don't need to elaborate on this much, but if we have an agenda item on an upcoming meeting, and we go out to, let's say, a business to go look at, what we're looking at approving, or or we have a neighbor, what kind of conversations can and can we not have with those people?
So you remember we talked, in a pre-meeting not too long ago about any ex parte communications. And maybe you were here, I don't remember, but the conversation was essentially anything that could influence you either way is not fair unless everybody hears it. So our recommendation, if a neighbor approaches you or somebody approaches you, is to just say, I can't, come to the meeting and talk about it then. So, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah.
I'm sure people will want to approach you and talk about it, but again, it's not fair to all the parties if everybody doesn't have the same
So
information.
we can't go independently even investigate the situation then? If it involves speaking to someone else?
Yeah, I would think that would be inappropriate and would require probably some disclosure to come back and say, I've had this conversation. Again, if somebody approaches you, as opposed to just going and looking at something, obviously, I know you've driven around and things like that, but having conversations that could influence you or sway you either direction would be inappropriate. Again, not necessarily, we're kind of stepping out of the Open and Public Meetings Act necessarily, but just the appropriateness of everybody having the same information when the planning commission looks at it.
I don't want to belabor this too much, but what about just like talking to, for instance, department heads within the city or people that are not parties to a specific decision, but may have some kind of expertise.
See, to me, I think you're encouraged often by Zach too, as the packets come out. If you have questions, come talk to us about it, because staff will provide that information in their staff report to get that information, yeah.
So us could be. I hear you saying, come talk to us, so us being staff, or could that, staff could be, it
Yeah,
could
'cause
be,
these are staff recommendations and they
could
can
that be
help.
Travis and engineering, or you're saying come to staff and ask if we should talk to engineering?
Yeah, I would come to staff,
This is staff.
yeah,
Yeah.
planning staff.
Yeah, we're the staff for the planning commission, so we would either direct you to go talk to somebody, or we would,
You'd go find out.
yeah, or we would go find out for you. But I don't think, like, if there's something from, like, for the armory, for example, we wouldn't say, oh, just on a whim, go talk to Kim Sorensen, right, the Parks and Rec director. We would want to give him a heads up, hey, a planning commission has a question, and they want to talk to you about something beforehand. so
And that would
they
allow,
know.
again, allow staff to then distribute that same information to everyone on the planning commission.
Thanks.
Okay? Thank you.
Another thing, if we're involved in a discussion about something that might happen in the city, and then it comes before us, that we didn't know that it was going to,
Right.
that how, at what point do we need to say, okay, I need to recuse myself, or
So that's,
I have
you
a
know,
conflict?
we ask for conflicts of interest before each meeting. If there's been some conversation you were a part of that you didn't know about, was gonna be on an agenda, and 6 months later it is, you could certainly disclose to the planning commission, hey, just so you know, I was part of a conversation where this was discussed. And then it's kind of, I won't say a judgment call, but if you feel you can still be impartial after that conversation, you don't necessarily need to recuse yourself. But if what you've heard and what that conversation was, it would be appropriate to recuse yourself from that item, that issue.
Is there any point where the commission itself could say, okay, we think such and such member shouldn't participate in this because of that conversation or whatever?
I've never, I suppose if an issue was raised of a possible conflict, then it would have to be addressed. And it would come down to whether you could feel you could be impartial.
It would probably come back to Mark to decide, is it a substantial conflict, I would think.
And like I've always said, if somebody does want to talk to you, you're always welcome to blame our office. Hey, the attorney's office has said we shouldn't have this conversation.
Also include that he is part of, like, in a way, planning staff. He represents the city. So you could go around me and go to Mark. You can go to Mark, but, yeah.
Okay,
I've done that.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now is there any business?
The only other thing I have to say is that this, next meeting is probably gonna be just as equally as long, so,
Okay.
but with more agenda items. So,
All right.
be prepared. Stock up with snacks.
Is there a
Motion to adjourn 8:45.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Hey, my watch says 8:44, so, I was gonna say, now you have to wait 1 minute.